Hey guys, Jacob Dupre here at Sweetwater. I'm going to show you some simple voicings for the blues. Let's jump right in. So we're going to start with the C blues and do what's called like a 1-4-5 blues. So I'm doing it really simple, no extra bebop changes or 2-5s or anything, just simple 1-4-5. And what I think these voicings are great for, especially people that maybe you're kind of stuck with playing a lot of root position voicings. You know, when you play the blues, you'll play it kind of like this. Which are technically the right chords, but you know, you probably might say to yourself, I wish I could play some hipper voicings. I wish I could at least play some basic voicing that was a little more fleshed out, a little more colorful, a little bit more in the jazz realm per se, rather than maybe the rock realm, which is what this would be good for. You know, that works great for that, but if you want to do this, got to change up your voicings a little bit. So the first thing I would say to do is I wouldn't try to play too many notes. You got to pick a voicing that's really simple for you to wrap your brain around and to get under your fingers. So for C7, you have to start with the building blocks of any chord really in most Western harmony, which is the 3rd and the 7th. Those are what defines the quality of the chord. It's usually the most important notes in the chord. So for a C7, you've got E's the 3rd and B flat is the flat 7. So you need that for sure, and I'm adding the root notes so you can hear the bass and hear the quality of the chord. Then add the 9th above that, so which would be the D, so that would be this chord. So that's a really simple chord that you can do to cover the blues, to cover a dominant 7th chord, which is this chord. It's 1, 3, 5, and flat 7. And that's root position, but what you're doing is just playing 3 and flat 7 and then adding the 9 above it. Now, something when you're playing chords that you always want to be conscious of is voice leading. And the basic idea of voice leading is the smoothest connection between notes. So when a chord moves, typically good voice leading is going to mean the notes move to the smallest distance they can, the most logical movement to the next note. So in this case, I'm just taking the E and the B flat and sliding them down a half step to get to F7. So here I've got a C9 chord, which is the dominant 7th with the 9. And then I'm going to slip down to F13, which is very close to it. So again, you've got E, B flat, and D, then just sliding down to E flat, A, and D. Very simple, and you see how small that movement is. I mean, on a keyboard or any instrument that we're used to, you can't really move much smaller than a half step. So that is the most smooth movement you can make there. And rather than doing something like this, playing that same voicing in F, you'd have to jump like this. It's not quite as smooth, right? So hear how those chords just connect really well. So that gets you 2 of the 3 chords in the 1-4-5 blues. It gives you the 1 and the 4 chord. So 1 as a C9, and then F13, your 4 chord. And now for the G chord, you can play the same voicing as the F if you want. They're really close to each other, so that would put them close. There's the F13, and then so a G13 would just be to move everything up a whole step. So now you've got 7, well you've got root G, 7, and then 3rd, and then 13 on the top, which is technically the 6th scale degree. So counting up the scale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but when it's in a jazz voicing like this, we call it a 13. So you have a 13 chord. So that'd be a G13, and then the F13, and then the C9, back to the C9. So that's all of it together. So here's the whole thing together. Then the F, back to C, back to F, then to G13, F13, and then C9 again. Cool. And again, this is very basic. This is something you start out with. You know, a lot of jazz players, especially seasoned players, will play voicings with way more than 3 notes. I mean, you could have, you know, as many as 8 to 10 notes if you really want to. I mean, you have 10 fingers, so that's about all you get. So yeah, it can get more complicated. You can add more notes, but this is a good place to start. So let me show you that in time. I have a couple bass lines that I've already mapped out that are walking a bass in C. So I'm going to start those out and just block these chords out for you so you can see them in time. I'm not going to play any rhythm, just going to hold them on each measure so you can really just hear them and pay attention to how they sound and how they lead, how each one leads to the next. So here we go. Cool. And at the end there, I kind of glossed over a progression that was going on because the bass line was kind of doing, which is a typical jazz progression, a 1-6-2-5. So at the end, and that led us back to the top of the 12-bar blues. So I probably should have covered those changes a little differently, but I won't maybe go into that because that could be a whole nother video on 1-6-2-5s, and if you guys want to hear that, you should say so, and I'll do a video on those. So here, let me show you. I was kind of splitting it between 2 hands, but really you can play. I mean, if you're walking a bass line with your left hand, you can play the voicings with your right. Since I wasn't walking a bass line, I just kind of instinctively played with 2 hands. But typically, in a lot, especially if there's a jazz player that's doing a lot of bebop playing, which is typically comping with your left hand with a chord kind of in the mid-range and soloing sort of mid-upper range, you got to be able to play that voicing in your left hand. So in your practice, I would definitely encourage you to play with both hands. Don't ever just learn it one way. You know, you have to be double-sided here. So let me show you if I was going to expand the voicings a little bit, add some notes, if I was going to play with my left hand, play the voicing I taught you before, and then add some notes up here, what that would be like. So something really simple you can just do is add, so we're in the key of C, you can add a G, which is the 5th, and then a C above it. And those will work over both the C7 and the F13 chords. So the C, and then over the F. So those both will work in both those chords. Now when you get to the G chord, you have to move up a whole step. So over the G chord, see here, this works good for C, and then the F. And then when you get to G, you have to move this G and C up to A and D. And then put the 13, the G13 underneath. And then you get that. So here's all of those together. G13, move up, and back down for F, and then C. Okay, so let me show you that in motion. Okay, so at the end I did something a little bit more advanced. I played that 1-6-2-5 progression I was talking about before and played C to A alt, A flat 9, sharp 5, and then D9, and then down to G alt, and then back home. And you'll notice again with these chords, because voice leading is so important, see how they move to each other. Actually, those last 3 chords, the top voicing, the upper structure as we call it, it's just moving down by half steps. So once I get to the A chord, here's the A chord, now it's all going to be half steps. So this. So that's another thing too. Definitely practice these in other keys, move voicings around, even doing something as simple as taking a voicing and moving it up by half steps. It will make your ears get used to hearing that chord in different tonalities and different key centers, and it will make your fingers get used to doing it as well. So once you put all that together and you add some soloing in, it kind of sounds like this. guys enjoyed checking out these blues voicings with me. If you have any other suggestions for topics, especially lesson videos like this one, you know, anything related to jazz harmony or keyboard or how to voice chords or something about this chord or these harmonies, I'm happy to take those down and do some videos on those. So please comment below, and thanks again for watching.